Welcome to Raja Ampat, an archipelago located at the northwest corner of Indonesia's West Papua province and encompassing 40,000 square kilometers, or 15,444 square miles, of land and sea. Raja Ampat is itself comprised of a series of more than 1,500 islands, which surround the main islands of Misul, Salawati, Batanta, and Waigeo, with over 600 species of stony corals, 700 species of mollusks, and 1,700 species of fishes. Raja Ampat is currently recognized among marine biologists as being the crown jewel of the world's tropical marine biodiversity. Raja Ampat occurs within the Coral Triangle, which, as can be seen in the map here, is an approximately triangular-shaped region encompassing Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, the Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. Indeed, the Coral Triangle is recognized as one of the 8 major coral reef zones of the world, and one that, like Raja Ampat contained within it, is profusely rich in marine biodiversity. We can see in this map that Raja Ampat is positioned slightly east of the Coral Triangle's centermost region. Note that this area is just west by northwest of Papua New Guinea. In its native languages, of which there are 4, the most prominent being Biak, the name Raja Ampat translates as 4 kings, with Ampat meaning 4 and Raja meaning kings. Thus, it is the area of the 4 kings. As per local mythology, it is held that in ancient times a woman found 7 eggs. 4 of these 7 eggs hatched and became the kings that occupied 4 of Raja Ampat's largest islands, these again being Misul, Salawati, Batanta, and Waigeo. With respect to its extremely abundant marine life, Raja Ampat is arguably first and foremost known for its living corals. As of 2024, this fact stands in stark contrast to many other tropical coral reef areas of the world, in which the corals are generally declining, with notably those in the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean having deteriorated severely in 2023 and 2024, primarily through unnaturally high water temperatures that are likely the result of anthropogenic climate change. In order to appreciate how coral bleaching can have devastating effects on a coral reef, let's briefly digress here and examine a Caribbean reef. Note the very healthy corals here in this west-central coastal region of Puerto Rico, videoed in 2020. Now see this same coral reef in October of 2024. Note the extreme coral bleaching, which has caused the coral tissues to turn white just prior to dying off completely. Other corals here have already died and are now covered in green algae. This is a very unhealthy coral reef that has mostly died during the time period extending from June of 2023 to October of 2024. By contrast, in Raja Ampat, which was designated Raja Ampat Marine Recreation Park in 2009 and has since that time enjoyed significant protection through implementation of strict conservation regulations, the corals and other marine organisms, as of 2024, are generally thriving. This can be attributed to several factors, including the general tolerance of the Indo-Pacific corals to temperature fluctuations, including especially very high temperatures, such as 96 degrees Fahrenheit or 36 degrees Celsius. Other factors that protect the corals of Raja Ampat include the capacity of these robust Indo-Pacific corals to recover from temperature-induced bleaching events. The general absence of human-generated pollution in the Raja Ampat area and the general absence of significant fishing within Raja Ampat as well. Thus, as of 2024, Raja Ampat is very possibly the best remaining area in the entire world for seeing healthy coral reefs. In order to enable a deeper understanding of, and therefore greater appreciation for, how a coral reef ecosystem functions to support such an amazing array of organisms, let's turn our attention to understanding some of the basics of coral biology. Corals are invertebrate organisms belonging to the Cnidaria, a phylum of creatures within the animal kingdom. Note that there are about 35 total recognized animal phyla, including, for examples, the Porifera, or sponges, the annelids, or worms, the arthropods, including crustaceans, insects, and spiders, the echinoderms, including sea stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers, the mollusks, including bivalve snails and cephalopods, and the chordata, which is comprised of animals possessing a dorsal hollow nerve cord. This includes invertebrate examples such as the tunicates, as well as vertebrate organisms, including fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Although cnidarians exhibit a wide variety of shapes and sizes, they all share the same distinguishing characteristics, including a simple stomach with a single mouth opening surrounded by stinging tentacles. We can note here that both corals and sea anemones are members of the Anthozoa, a subphylum of the Cnidaria. However, unlike sea anemones, each individual coral animal is referred to as a polyp, and most coral polyps exist in groups of hundreds to thousands of genetically identical polyps that establish a colony. The colony is generated via a process known as budding, in which the original polyp clones itself to generate hundreds or thousands of identical polyps. Note that in corals, budding is a form of asexual reproduction. But corals are also capable of reproducing sexually. Many coral species sexually reproduce 1 or 2 times each year. Most coral species reproduce sexually by releasing eggs and sperm into the water. However, just when in the year the spawning occurs varies among coral species. When an egg and a sperm unite, they establish a larval coral form referred to as a planula. This earliest of coral life stages has the appearance of a tiny jellyfish that floats about initially near the surface of the water. Later it will descend in the water column and attach to the hard substrate where, as a polyp, it can asexually reproduce many copies of its cells and thereby generate new polyps, which in turn form a new colony. Note that once a coral colony is established, it can sexually reproduce to generate new planula larvae. These planula larvae will in turn establish new coral colonies throughout the coral reef system. Corals are broadly classified as being either hard corals or soft corals. Some 800 species of hard corals, also known as reef-building corals, have so far been identified. By contrast, soft corals, which include sea fans, sea feathers, and sea whips, lack the rock-like calcareous skeletons of the hard corals. For support and anchoring purposes, the soft corals thus develop wood-like cores. About these cores, flesh-like rinds of living tissue are generated. Like their hard coral counterparts, soft corals also live in colonies. These soft coral colonies often resemble brightly colored plants or trees. Note the distinguishing characteristic of the hard base of the hard coral on the left versus the soft base of the soft coral on the right. Hard corals utilize the abundant calcium solubilized in the surrounding seawater to create what is in effect a hardened calcium carbonate mineral deposit, often of gigantic proportions. This provides for structure, protection, and growth of the coral colony. The hard corals comprising coral reefs are thus formed by millions of tiny polyps establishing these large calcium carbonate structures. This in turn creates essential habitat for literally hundreds to thousands of other marine species. From the perspective of being one gigantic living entity, coral reefs can be regarded as the largest living structures on the planet, and the only living structure that can be observed from space. Coral reefs have evolved on Earth over the past 200 to 300 million years. During their evolutionary history, it is especially notable that coral polyps developed symbiosis with tiny, single-celled plants known as zooxanthellae. Indeed, inside the actual tissues of each coral polyp live these microscopic, single-celled algae, sharing space, gas exchange, and nutrients upon which the survival of both the coral and the zooxanthellae depend. Thus, although corals are classified by biologists as being animals, the symbiotic algae within the coral tissues makes the corals part plant. This unique symbiotic relationship between plant and animal also contributes to the myriad striking colors of corals. As the symbiotic algae, the zooxanthellae, need light to photosynthesize and thereby generate energy and nutrients such as glucose, which is, of course, utilized along with other zooxanthellae-generated nutrients by the coral, it is important to appreciate that different species of coral colonies thus inevitably compete for space on the seafloor. And it is this access to naturally illuminated areas that drives corals to compete for space. And, in turn, this drives the hundreds of coral species to their structural and functional extremes, amidst a competitive environment comprised of so many different species. Notably, this also renders corals highly susceptible to environmental stresses. Indeed, the primary cause of coral bleaching is climate change. A warming planet results in a warming ocean, as well as a change in water temperature. Significantly, an elevation in water temperature of just 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit can lead to extensive coral bleaching. As a reminder of the sometimes irreparable damage that bleaching events can have on coral reefs, let's take another look at the Caribbean coral reef that we saw earlier. It is likely that this coral will never recover from this bleaching event. Well, let's happily return again to the coral reefs of Raja Ampat. While the basis of the coral diet is provided by the zooxanthellae, corals also capture food from the surrounding water as well. During feeding, a coral polyp will project its tentacles out from its body and wave them about in the water current where they encounter small fish, plankton, or other food material. The surface of each coral tentacle contains thousands of stinging cells called nematocytes. These apprehend, stun, and/or kill the prey before passing it along to the coral polyp's mouth. This illustration shows the subcellular structure known as a nematocyst, as it is being, from left to right, projected outward from a nematocyte. The nematocyst has a toxic barb on its end that stings prey or would-be predators. Growing at rates of 0.3 to 2 centimeters, that is 0.1 to 0.8 inches per year, a mature coral reef may require 10,000 years to fully develop. Yet despite this slow growth rate, a great diversity of marine species have evolved to occupy the similarly great array of habitats formed by the many and varied coral shapes and sizes that represent a mature coral reef. Therefore, a thriving, healthy coral reef may need to be many thousands of years old before it can fully sustain all of the fishes, invertebrates, and other organisms that have evolved to occupy its myriad niches. Coral reefs occur throughout the oceans, from deep cold waters to shallow tropical waters. Notably, temperate and tropical reefs are formed only in a zone extending no more than 30 degrees north to 30 degrees south of the equator. Moreover, reef-building corals prefer to develop at depths shallower than 30 meters, or 100 feet, or where the temperature range is between 16 to 32 degrees Celsius, or 61 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Note that high light levels are a coral requirement as well. Based upon current estimates, shallow water coral reefs occupy somewhere between 284,000 and 512,000 square kilometers of our Earth. If all the world's shallow water coral reefs were brought together in a single area, the occupied space would equal somewhere between an area of land ranging from the country of Ecuador, the low estimate, to Spain, the higher estimate. This area of about 198,000 square miles in an ocean of 140 million square miles represents less than 0.015% of the ocean. That's 15 thousandths of 1%. Yet it is important to consider that coral reefs harbor more than 1/4 of the ocean's biodiversity. This is a particularly amazing fact to ponder in view of the knowledge that no other ecosystem occupies such a limited area with more life forms. Let's now examine the general characteristics of 4 major types of hard corals that occur in Raja Ampat. We'll begin with the branched corals, genus Acropora. In Raja Ampat, some 149 species within the genus Acropora have been identified. Popular names for these corals include staghorn, elkhorn, and laminar. Genus Acropora corals are some of the major reef corals responsible for establishing the immense calcium carbonate structure of a coral reef. Depending on the species and location, Acropora corals may grow as plates, tables, or broad branches. Acropora corals are colonies of individual polyps, which are about 2 millimeters across, and share tissue and a nerve net. The polyps can withdraw back into the coral in response to movement or disturbance by potential predators, but when undisturbed they protrude slightly during the day. The reason why we usually don't see the fully extended polyps of these corals so well is that they typically extend further at night to help capture plankton and dissolved organic matter from the water. The massive and encrusting coral, commonly known as brain coral or honeycomb coral, is the only extant species within its genus. This species can form massive dome-shaped colonies of great size. The walls of this coral species are distinctive and are not connected to each other. This gives the coral a smooth, rounded surface and usually a cream or grayish-brown color. Leaf corals, such as the cabbage coral seen here, often form extensive colonies. They are generally found in shallow reefs. Colonies of this species have irregular, two-sided fronds. The corallites house the polyps and are very shallow. They form widely separated rows parallel to the fronds. The fronds may be clustered together in a supercolony formed from one or more individual colonies and extending for several meters across the seabed. Hood coral is commonly known as smooth cauliflower coral. It has broad, blunt, ended branches, and colonies become thicker and more massive as they grow. The corallites are hooded and sunk beneath the general surface. Among all the coral species, this is the one most tolerant to environmental changes. Colonies can appear cream, pink, bluish, or green. And let's take a moment to look at one more type of hard coral. The hard coral seen here is in the genus Goniopora. Found in lagoons and turbid water conditions, Goniopora have numerous daisy-like polyps that extend outward from the base, each tipped with 24 stinging tentacles which surround the mouth. And let's also look at a soft coral of the genus Dendronephthia. These corals are famously very difficult to keep in aquariums because they require a near constant supply of small foods such as phytoplankton. Giant sea fans are common and conspicuous in tropical seas and a favorite with underwater photographers. They are Gorgonian and therefore soft corals. Growing at right angles to the prevailing current, their tentacles strain microscopic particles of food from the water. We can ask if a sea fan constitutes a coral colony. The answer is a resounding yes. Sea fans are actually colonies of many small individual coral polyps connected together to form a lacy sheet. Let's turn our attention now to some of the echinoderms that live in the waters of Raja Ampat. Echinoderms include feather stars, sea urchins, and sea cucumbers. The very spiny feather star is an example of an echinoderm known as a crinoid or sea lily. Crinoids are passive suspension feeders, meaning they rely on water current to bring food particles to them for feeding. Using the holdfast at the base of the crinoid, they cling to Gorgonian corals, hard corals, or the rocky substrate of the coral reef. As soon as a food particle touches an arm of the crinoid, it retracts and curls inward towards the mouth. They feed on algae and small crustaceans. Members of the class Crinoidea, including this Bennett's feather star, are gonochoric. This means that during spawning, the pinnule walls rupture and the eggs and sperm are shed into the seawater. Embryos elongate into free-swimming larvae called doliolaria, which later sink to the bottom, where they metamorphose into stalked sessile crinoids. Another echinoderm, this one rather common in the waters of Raja Ampat, is the blue sea star, Lynchia libigata. This species inhabits the tropical waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, from the western Indian Ocean to southeastern Polynesia. Notably, the blue sea star is extremely sensitive to changes in temperature, oxygen level, and pH. Its presence here, therefore, is a good indicator that the reef is healthy. The chocolate chip sea star is usually found on shallow, sandy, and muddy bottoms, and seagrass beds in lagoon and back reef areas. Here it feeds upon sponges and other benthic invertebrates. Many years ago, I purchased a chocolate chip sea star and brought it home to my marine aquarium, where it promptly ate 2 of my purple sea urchins. I quickly returned it to the pet shop. The crown of thorns sea star is found throughout the Indo-Pacific region, ranging from the Indian Ocean, Red Sea and East Africa, to the Pacific, from mainland Japan to Lord Howe Island, and from west coast of Panama to the Gulf of California. A predatory sea star that consumes hard coral tissues, crown of thorns sea star outbreaks have from time to time famously inflicted great damage on areas of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The giant basket star is a gorgonocephalid basket star, a type of echinoderm. Its lengthy arms, up to 1 meter, that is 3.3 feet span-wise, are highly branched. It inhabits reef slopes exposed to current throughout the Indo-Pacific, ranging from the Red Sea to New Caledonia. During the day, it coils up into a tight ball. At night, it spreads its arms to form a basket and feeds upon plankton. The cushion star, like all sea stars, moves on a system of tube feet, so called because they are operated by a hydraulic system controlled by the main body. They are known to prey on corals and other sedentary animals, as well as decaying organic matter. They feed by everting their entire stomach through the mouth and digesting the soft tissue off of a coral skeleton or the meat out of a clam right in the open environment. Here we see a sea cucumber, an echinoderm in the class Holothroidea. Sea cucumbers feed by capturing organic matter on their sticky tentacles. When attacked by a predator, sea cucumbers can eviscerate their internal organs. The sticky organs may entangle and distract the predator and provide a meal while the cucumber escapes. The shed organs soon grow back. The magnum sea cucumber is found singly buried in gravel, rubble, and sandy substrates over current-swept coral and rocky reefs. Its tentacles extend from the hole into the open water and function to capture organic material upon which the magnum sea cucumber feeds. Notably, it feeds primarily nocturnally on plankton. Sea cucumbers, such as the individual seen here tentatively identified as an amberfish sea cucumber, generally inhabit sandy and rubble areas on reef slopes, outer lagoons, and are usually seen at depths between 15 to 100 feet, that is 5 to 30 meters. Sea urchins are in the echinoderm class known as the Echinoidea. The black long-spined sea urchin has a body which is predominantly black with a red eye spot in the center. The spines of these urchins are long, thin, and completely black. Though very delicate in appearance, the long, sharp spines of this sea urchin species enable it to very effectively defend itself. On the coral reef, these urchins are excellent algae controllers and thus provide algae-free substrate for new coral polyps to attach to and thereafter form a coral colony. Marine flatworms are in the phylum Platyhelminthes. Polyclads range in length from 3 millimeters to 10 centimeters, that is 0.12 inches to 3.9 inches. They have a flattened, roughly oval body shape and, in many cases, a pair of short tentacles on the head. Most polyclad worms hide away from direct light. However, some of the brightly colored species often are active during the day. With their flamboyant coloring, they advertise their potential toxicity to visual predators such as fish. Pterobellids are a marine family of polychaete worms. They are segmented worms, and therefore in the phylum Annelida. Called spaghetti worms, the pterobellid worms have numerous, very long tentacles which radiate from near the mouth and are used for finding and collecting food particles from the sediment surface. We now turn our attention to the phylum Mollusca, the mollusks, which includes the bivalves, gastropods, and cephalopods. The giant clam seen here is a bivalve, and this was an extraordinarily large one too. Its length was easily over 4 feet, and its width may have been as great as 3 feet. So about 1.3 meters long and just under 1 meter wide. Giant clams have multiple vertical folds in their thick, heavy shells that give them their characteristic wavy opening. Unlike other species of clams, this one can never completely close its shell to protect its soft mantle, which is usually yellow, golden brown, or green and marked with iridescent blue, purple, or green spots, as well as clear spots called windows. The windows allow sunlight to filter in and allow algae inside the clam's shell to photosynthesize. In the mantle are 2 siphons, one used to pull seawater and plankton into the mantle, and the other that pushes water out of the shell during spawning. Like fingerprints, no 2 colorations and patterns found in giant clams are the same. Giant clams are omnivore filter feeders. They pull water into their mantle and filter both zooplankton and phytoplankton from it. The clam's shells also provide protection for billions of algae in exchange for the clam having the opportunity to feed on the sugars and proteins the algae produce through photosynthesis. Giant clams are sessile animals, meaning they live in one place for their entire lives. They start their lives as planktonic larvae, which swim and feed in the water column until they reach their next stage, which is when they find a place to settle. They attach to reefs, rocks, or other steady surfaces and can take decades to reach their full size. Giant clams reproduce via external fertilization, an event that involves clams releasing eggs and sperm into the water column. Individuals can release both eggs and sperm, but cannot self-fertilize. They can live to be a maximum of 100 years old and are not social animals. Spondylus is a genus of bivalve mollusks, the only genus in the family Spondylidae. They are known in English as spiny oysters or thorny oysters, although they are not in fact true oysters, but rather are closely related to scallops. As is the case in all scallops, genus Spondylus bivalves have multiple eyes around the edges of their mantle, and they have relatively well-developed nervous system. Their nervous ganglia are concentrated in the visceral region, with recognizable optical lobes connected to the eyes. The electric fire clam is widespread throughout the tropical waters of the central Indo-Pacific region from Indonesia to Palau Islands and New Caledonia. Research by graduate student Lindsay Doherty showed that the apparent flashing light display of this clam is not a bioluminescence phenomenon, but is instead coming from reflection of the ambient light, sun or diving light. Apparently, these clams have a highly reflective tissue on the very outer edge of their mantle that is exposed and then hidden very quickly, so that the change back and forth from white reflective tissue to the red tissue creates the appearance of flashing. Nudibranchs are members of the class Gastropoda. They are thus snails, but snails that lack shells. The name nudibranch means naked gill because the gills of these snails are exposed and not covered by the shell. Seen here, Philidia varicosa is probably the nudibranch most frequently noticed by divers. It is a common species usually found in the open on rocks. It occurs at moderately protected to highly exposed locations at depths from 1 to 49 meters, that is 3 to 161 feet. Chromodorus is a very colorful genus of sea slugs or dorid nudibranchs. Notably, within the genus Chromodorus, there are currently 101 classified species. The one seen here is Colles chromodorus. Chromodorid nudibranchs commonly exhibit chemical defenses to protect themselves from predators. Most of the species that exhibit this behavior make use of bioactive compounds such as alkaloids, diterpenes, and sesquiterpenes from sponges upon which they feed. Seen here is Willen's chromodorus that can be distinguished from other similar appearing Chromodorus species by the very prominent white specks found on the gills and rhinophores. Seen here is Anna's chromodorus. It has a diet that consists of only one group of sponge, known as Petrospongia. This nudibranch seeks out this group of sponge due to its noxious chemical composition. Chromodorus anni is able to absorb this compound and store it in the glands that stretch around the mantle. These stored chemicals are apparently unpleasant to some would-be predator fish species. Thus, Chromodorus anni can avoid predation from these species. The white-mantled Glossodoris is semi-translucent white all over with a thin yellow margined mantle. It also has opaque white patches on its upper mantle. Both its gills and rhinophores are also white. Like many of the other nudibranchs we just looked at, this species also eats sponges, which endow it with toxins that make it unpalatable to many would-be predator species, such as certain fishes. Phylodesmium is a genus of predatory sea slugs. The nudibranchs in this genus often show extraordinary mimicry, each species very closely resembling its prey species, which are octocorals, a kind of soft coral. Some of the species are also unusual in that they are able to utilize zooxanthellae from their prey in a symbiotic relationship that provides them with extra nutrition from photosynthesis. Hence, they are commonly called solar-powered sea slugs. The Spanish dancer is the largest of nudibranch species. It has bright red to orange body, sometimes with speckling or marbling. Margins are wide and rolled, sometimes with red, white, or pink bands. There are 6 separate gill branches on its back, and this gives the animal its Latin name. Juveniles are pale with purple spots and blotches on the body and mantle. As they are nocturnal, Spanish dancers are often encountered on night dives. Spanish dancers have been given their common name due to the way that they swim. They flex their body from one side to another to create a swimming motion. And now we move on to the phylum Mollusca group known as the cephalopods. At first glance, the blue-ringed octopus looks perfectly innocuous. Its psychedelic coloring and pint-sized packaging make it seem even more adorable than alarming. But don't let its cuddly exterior fool you. This tiny octopus can kill you, and quickly. Native to the Indo-Pacific, the blue-ringed octopus can be found in the soft, sandy bottom of shallow tide pools and coral reefs. When not seeking food or a mate, blue-ringed octopuses often hide in crevices, shells, or marine debris. If one catches them outside of their cozy hiding spots, it's easy to see how the animal gets its name. When threatened, bright blue rings appear all over its body as a warning signal to potential predators. Although all octopuses, as well as cuttlefish and some squid, are venomous, the blue-ringed octopus is in a league of its own. Indeed, its venom is 1,000 times more powerful than cyanide. And this golf ball-sized powerhouse packs enough venom to kill 26 humans within minutes. It's no surprise, therefore, that the blue-ringed octopus is recognized as one of the most dangerous animals in the ocean. Blue-ringed octopuses produce a potent neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin, a potentially deadly substance also found in pufferfish. The venom is produced by symbiotic bacteria in the animal's salivary glands and is more toxic than that of any land mammals. It's primarily used when hunting. The octopus captures crabs, shrimp, and small fish by pecking through its prey's exoskeleton with its beak and inserting the venom. Then it will use its beak to pick off meat while the prey remains helplessly paralyzed. In the end, only the tough outer shell of its prey remains. So what happens if one is bitten by a blue-ringed octopus? First, the venom blocks nerve signals throughout the body, causing muscle numbness. Other symptoms include nausea, vision loss or blindness, loss of senses, and loss of motor skills. Ultimately, it will cause muscle paralysis, including the muscles needed for humans to breathe, leading to respiratory arrest. There is no known antidote, but victims can be saved if artificial respiration is started immediately. If you encounter this blue and yellow beauty, back away in a hurry. Its bite is usually painless, so you might not know you've been bitten until it's too late. Fortunately, the blue-ringed octopus isn't aggressive. It's only likely to bite humans if cornered or handled. In fact, There have been no known deaths from its bite since the 1960s. As long as you keep your hands to yourself, you should be fine. And yes, I kept my hands to myself, although I did get my camera within about 2 inches of the octopus with my macro lens. I had to get that close to keep it in focus. We had a total of 3 blue-ringed octopus sightings in our 26 days in Raja Ampat. All of these were on night dives and at about 50 to 60 feet of depth. And now we encounter a considerably less toxic octopus species, the algae octopus. The algae octopus uses an elaborate camouflage scheme to stay safe. It can change the color and shape of structures on its body and arms to make its body appear as though it is an algae-covered shell. When that doesn't work, it has another defense mechanism: run. It can hoist its body on 2 of its 8 arms and skedaddle, running as fast as it can swim. In fact, it's only one of 2 species of octopus that's known to run on 2 quote-unquote legs. Big blue octopuses, Octopus cyanea, are commonly found in the tropical regions of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. They are scattered throughout warm waters, from the Hawaiian Islands to the Red Sea in Northeast Africa. There have also been reports of big blue octopuses in the Mediterranean Sea and southeast of Africa, such as along the coast of Madagascar, Tanzania, Somalia, and the Seychelles. Big blue octopuses are a fast-growing, highly fecund, short-lived species. Because big blue octopuses lack larvae, they instead have large yolk-filled eggs. Egg development requires about 20 to 30 days, and eggs are about 3 millimeters long when laid. Their growth rate post-hatching ranges from 5.6 to 5.8% per day. Blue octopuses reach their full adult sizes from 13 to 15 months of age. At that time, they are ready for reproduction. Big blue octopuses reproduce sexually and are polygynous. Females die after spawning because they stop eating to protect their eggs. One of the heavyweights in the cuttlefish family, the broad-club cuttlefish is the second largest cuttlefish species, with 8 arms and 2 feeding tentacles. This cunning predator seemingly hypnotizes prey with flashing colored bands that ripple along its skin. The 2 largest clubbed arms fan out at angles from the body, while the 2 feeding tentacles do the striking and initial grabbing of prey. The broad club cuttlefish grows up to 20 inches in length. That's about 50 centimeters. Males are usually larger than females. Their diet consists of small shrimps, fish, and crabs. All cuttlefish, of course, are cephalopods, related to squid, octopus, and the chambered nautilus. The cuttlefish's flat body allows it to live and hover near the ocean bottom, where it finds its favorite food. An outer shell once covered the cuttlefish's body, but it has since evolved into a porous internal shell called a cuttlebone. Cuttlefish move by undulating a delicate fringe that runs along the entire body. But for a quick getaway, it expels a forceful stream of water through its siphon. When threatened, cuttlefish can produce a covering cloud of ink called sepia. Note that this broad-club cuttlefish has just captured a small parrotfish, and it wants to keep away from me. I guess it fears I might try to take that parrotfish away. And of course I wouldn't do that. Male broad-club cuttlefishes fight for choice mating dens. Most fights end without major injuries. After the males win their territory, female cuttlefish appear at the dens and mate with resident males. Fertilization is internal. Here is a baby cuttlefish, about 3/4 of an inch long, that was seen on a night dive. Note how it holds on to this small piece of branching coral. After mating, the female retreats deep within the den, where she lays her eggs one at a time. She coats the eggs with a protective sheath and carefully cements them to the roof of the den. She leaves the eggs unattended to develop and to hatch on their own. The female dies shortly thereafter. Well, let's shift gears once again and consider the phylum known as the arthropods, the phylum Arthropoda. And here we're going to be considering the subphylum of the Crustacea. The banded coral shrimp occurs circumglobally in tropical marine waters. With regard to reproduction, it is curious to note that males and females pair off to mate, possibly pairing off as juveniles and remaining together for years. The female mates with her paired male immediately after molting. The painted spiny lobster, also known as the Indonesian spiny lobster, is a brightly colored crayfish that is easily recognized by the long black and white stripes along the legs, as well as green abdomen with white and black stripes. Disregarding their very long antennae, the body of the painted spiny lobster grows to about 40 centimeters or 16 inches in length. Unlike the western rock lobster, painted crayfish are solitary, but both are nocturnal and hide in caves and crevices during the day. They are carnivorous but not aggressive and will mainly scavenge or catch slow-moving prey. If disturbed by an eager biologist, they will flick their powerful tails to quickly escape. Here we see a juvenile painted spiny lobster. It's only about 2 inches long from the eyes to the tail. Look how long those antennae are, however. The camel shrimp, also known as the hinge-beak prawn, is a species of shrimp found in the Indo-Pacific. Up to 4 centimeters, that is 1.6 inches, in length, the shrimp has large black eyes and features red and white lines on a translucent body. It has many white ocelli, spots, as well as Y-shaped white mark on the upper front part of its carapace. This shrimp is found in hollows and crevices from 5 to 35 meters, that is 16 to 115 feet, deep, where it forms groups consisting of dozens of individuals. One study determined that the ovigerous females carry from 267 to 1,764 eggs. The eggs take 9 days to hatch after spawning at a temperature of 29.2 degrees Celsius or 84.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And here we see something extremely unusual. Was very fortunate to get this flat rock crab just as it was emerging from its old exoskeleton. It was in the act of molting. It's about to pop out here. There it goes. It leaves the old exoskeleton behind, and the colorful new flat rock crab emerges. Although the spotted porcelain crab resembles true crabs, they are actually more closely related to squat lobsters. There seem to be 2 theories as to why they are called porcelain crabs. The first theory holds that they are called porcelain crabs because they are extremely delicate and body parts such as legs and claws break off easily. These are usually regenerated by the next molt. The second theory holds that the white edges of the crab resemble porcelain. As can be seen here, the spotted porcelain crab prefers to spend most of its time within the safety of an anemone. They have a commensal relationship with the anemones. The crabs receive protection from the anemones, and the anemones are unharmed. The spotted porcelain crab filter feeds by flicking its fan-like mouthparts open and shut, We can see that going on here right now. The Achaeus decorator crab, sometimes known as the orangutan crab, is a crab of the family Anacidae, which includes the spider crabs and the decorator crab. It can be observed in waters of the central Indo-Pacific. With a carapace of only about 2 centimeters or 0.8 inches in diameter, it has relatively long arms, which are thickly covered with fine hairs, red or reddish-brown in color, and often laden with small bits of debris for further camouflage, hence the name decorator crab. The sleepy sponge crab is the largest species of sponge crab. It grows to a carapace width of 20 centimeters, or 8 inches, and lives in shallow waters across the Indo-Pacific region. Like other related crabs, the sleepy sponge crab camouflages itself by carrying a sponge on its back, which it cuts to size with its claws and then holds in place with its last 2 pairs of legs. Instead of a sponge, the sleepy sponge crab has occasionally been observed carrying other materials, including a hollow piece of wood and the sole of a discarded shoe. Little reproductive data are available for this species. One ovigerous, egg-carrying female from the Marquesas Islands was carrying about 130,000 eggs. And here we see a very small, perhaps 3/4 inch wide crustacean atop a plate coral. The genus name Dardanus of the white-spotted hermit crab refers to the son of Zeus and Electra in Greek mythology, while the species name Megistos is the superlative of the Greek word mega, therefore it means the largest. These large crabs have a bright red body with small white eye spots surrounded by black. Their bodies are covered with long, erect, coarse hairs of a dark red color. They have a pair of long white primary antennae or antennules. The anemone hermit crab has a broad distribution in the Indo-Pacific region, from the Seychelles in the west to Japan and Hawaii in the east. In Australia, it is found from New South Wales as far south as Port Jackson to Queensland. This species usually lives on coral reefs and in the intertidal zone at depths of 1 to 27 meters, that is 3 to 89 feet. It usually carries sea anemones on its shell, which it uses to protect itself from its main predator, cephalopods of the genus Octopus. The anemones are collected at night by the crab stoking and tapping on the anemone until it loosens its grip on the substrate, at which point it moves on to the gastropod shell that the hermit crab inhabits. And here we see a smaller, unidentified species of hermit crab. There are a number of different hermit crab species in Raja Ampat. Mantis shrimps are carnivorous marine crustaceans of the order Stomatopoda. Mantis shrimps typically grow to around 10 centimeters, that is 3.9 inches, in length, while a few can reach up to 38 centimeters, or 15 inches. About 520 species of mantis shrimp have been discovered worldwide. Most of their time is spent in burrow. Mantis shrimps are thought to have the most complex eyes in the animal kingdom, and they have the most complex front end of any visual system ever discovered. And perhaps appropriately enough, we conclude this presentation of invertebrates of Raja Ampat with the subphylum Chordata. These are animals with a dorsal hollow nerve cord. They include certain invertebrate organisms, such as the tunicates or sea squirts, and they include all of the vertebrate organisms, including the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Tunicates were once thought to be sponges. However, further examination shows them to be much more advanced organisms than sponges, Indeed, they have a larval fish-like stage. After this, they settle down on the bottom and develop into what superficially resembles a sponge. And although they are filter feeders, they are, nonetheless, animals possessing a dorsal hollow nerve cord and therefore in the phylum Chordata.